Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Chris. I run your open source group here at Google. When I sent off, well, actually, when Ellen did the hard work of setting up the room and sending off the announcement that Joel was coming, I got a lot of email. I got one was like, "Wow, it's really funny that Joel's coming here in the middle of perf," and I thought that was scary and funny at the same time because I was in the middle of committee when I got that. And then another one was, "Can we get a copy of Stack Overflow for our internal use?" And I was like, well, you can ask him at the thing. Which brings up questions. We have a Dory instance set up. If you'd like to use it and you don't feel like using your own voice and just typing, that's fine. And for our friends who are VCing from 7 or 8 offices worldwide, so just search for Spolsky. I'm sure you'll find the Dory page. You're smart people. So that's about it. With no further ado, Joel Spolsky. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks for coming. Everybody, can people hear me? Is this working? I'm trying to stand over here because I understand that these scanners are trying to take an image of my brain, which you're going to upload into a computer and run to do searches for the best sushi restaurant in Palo Alto for the rest of my life. I'm going to talk today about Stack Overflow. Well, let me introduce myself a little bit if you don't know the whole story. I'm actually with Michael Pryor, who's sitting here, the co-founder of Fog Creek Software, which is a software company in... I'm going to walk around a little bit because when I stand here, the camera goes on me. It's a software company in New York City that we started about 8 years ago. It makes FogBugs, which is bug tracking and project management software used by development teams around the world to make better software. Another project that we've launched recently, working with a guy named Jeff Atwood, who is a blogger at the website codinghard.com, is called Stack Overflow, and that's what I want to talk about. Stack Overflow is a website where people ask questions and get answers. You may not be able to see that so well back there. Let me just make sure. Yeah, that's we're getting the whole screen here. There are a lot of question and answer sites, and there's a couple of things I want to talk to today because this is Google that have to do with search, because I actually feel like search engines are kind of failing in a particular realm of expert questions and answers, where something you could ask an expert and the expert would be able to give you a true and correct answer, and the search engines, for various reasons, which I'll go into, are just not finding them. And so a lot of the companies organized around search have tried to make question and answer type portals, and Yahoo is famous for this "how is Babby formed" question. Mostly what you find on Yahoo Answers appears to be adolescents asking questions about reproductive sciences, and to put it politely, and most of what you find, and for various other reasons, this stuff is just not working out that well on the search engines. But what I'm really going to do today is tell you a little bit of a story, and it's a story about anthropology and sociology. And the story is about how, when you have a group of people and you give them an environment, you don't even have to have the people, you just create an environment, those people will come into the environment and behave according to what you built in certain very, very subtle ways that you probably didn't think about. So these are the Spanish Steps in Rome. And they're meant to go from the Spanish embassy, the Bourbon embassy, at the base of the steps up to the Trinità dei Monti church at the top. And so they were built to be stairs. But they became sort of this living room for backpackers in the middle of Rome, which many of you probably went to in your gap year. And partially it has to do with the steps being the perfect, comfortable height to sit on. The steps are very wide, so you're not blocking anyone if you're sitting there. And you have a fantastic view of the piazza down at the bottom when you're sitting on these steps, and so they became sort of a living room because of the shape. And this was completely non-intentional. Some things are a little bit more intentional, where you create an environment with the goal of maybe steering people or letting people wait in line or whatever it is that you're doing. And some things are even more precisely designed to create a certain type of behavior, whatever it may be. And one of the things that we're learning as we moving from the era of computing to moving into the era of the internet, is that we're no longer worrying about computer-human interaction, because that's kind of a solved problem. Usability, I don't want to say solved, but usability is something which is no longer a major impediment, and there are a lot of known solutions. What's not known so well is when you're using a computer and there are other people involved, because it's an email program, or it's a social program, or it's social networking, or it's Web 2.0. I'm not allowed to say that. I take that back. you have to think about human-to-human interaction. That means you have to be an anthropologist, and you have to think about how humans work, and you have to think about stuff that ethnographers and cultural anthropologists like to think about all the time. So that's really what we thought about. The environment in anthropology, it's very clear that the environment that you create influences people and how they behave. And similarly, the user interface that you create for your applications will influence how people behave, and you have to think about it as an anthropologist to be able to do a good job. And I'm going to talk about how we did that with Stack Overflow and why it works, and so on. So when you have an app like Yahoo Answers, I just want to poke around some of the other, this is what we did in the early days of Stack Overflow. We poked around some of the competition, the question and answer websites, to try to see, like, what the heck is going on here in terms of user interface. And some of this may be accidental. Ask, answer, discover. What is it about this website that means that you really do get teenagers asking questions like, what eats the ants I squish? Well, at least it's not who eats the ants I squish. Mahalo Answers, I don't know if you've heard of this, but this is a website from Jason Calacanis, who has an inordinate belief in micropayments for some reason. And so the website is all about earning a Mahalo dollar doing this and spending a Mahalo dollar doing that. And that creates a certain environment, and it creates questions that are all kind of like scams where you can earn $7 or get a coupon good for $5 off at Supercuts or whatever. There are much more serious forums. This is the sort of standard, I'm going to call it the PHP BB look, because almost all web forums are either using software that looks exactly like this, or they're actually using PHP itself, which looks exactly like this, with this idea of topics and replies and who knows, and it all looks very serious. There's a particular website whose name I will not mention, but it's got a big hyphen in the middle of the URL. And we'll call it the hyphen website from now on. And it is, I don't want to officially say the raison d'etre for Stack Overflow, but it certainly pushed me over the edge, because this is a website where you ask a question, usually typing it into Google, about a specific engineering or technical topic. And the answer appears to exist there, and when you go there, you don't see the answer, and you see a lot of pages saying, please sign up, give us money, and you will see the answer. And you say, wait a minute, that's not right. They must be showing a different page to Google than they're showing to regular people. And there's a secret, which I won't let you in on, because I want them to burn in hell. But that particular site looks like what it looks like, because, I mean, they've created a site that, what does this look like? This looks like one of those corporate enterprise startups, right? Like, we won't even tell you how much it costs. Just go to the bank and get all your money and bring it to us and give it to us. And then go back to the bank, see if you can get a loan. Amazon sort of kept reading all the articles in Newsweek magazine about how Google was just a big search box. So they made a big search box where you can ask a question right at the top. And I don't know if that really makes sense, but people ask a whole lot of questions on here, and they don't answer a heck of a lot of questions. And that's just a part of, like, the design decision to emphasize asking rather than answering. So we built Stack Overflow, and it looks kind of bizarre, and there's all kinds of little bits and pieces all over the place, which makes it beloved to programmers. But I want to go over, here's a little bit of the story. Concept was about the beginning of 2008. We started coding almost exactly a year ago. We launched in September 2008. We had like a 4-week beta or something. And we've been around for about 6 months. And we're currently running 6 million visits a month. And I'll go into more details on the specs. There's certain reasons that we thought search engines were failing with various queries. This is not actually a particularly bad example of it, but knowing that li is an HTML tag is something that search engines don't necessarily know. I'll go more into it. This is my list of problems with search that Stack Overflow is trying to solve, and we're trying to solve all these problems at the same time. Number one, the sign-up scams. So that's the website with the hyphen, where they're trying to, they tell you that you have to sign up and pay if you want to see the answer, and actually you don't. There's just these little road bumps, like register. This is from SQL Server Central, but a lot of them have this. It's like, hey, we got the answer for you. Just just please register. And that's just a little bit frustrating, and that actually reduces participation, I think, dramatically. Now we're going to get into some serious things here. Search engines get you a lot of wrong answers when you search for highly technical questions, and that's the biggest problem. So here are 3 popular categories. A security hole. A lot of times you'll find a piece of sample code that somebody has said, here's the answer to your problem, and it's something like turn off your firewall, or more specifically, Just the typical like XXS vulnerabilities, SQL injection vulnerabilities that you see in like so much sample code. And when you see that result, you do a search, you get a result, you say, whoa, there's an XXS vulnerability there. I got to tell this guy. There's no way to do it. There's no way to change it, and there's no way to fix it on a typical forum software because you're looking at a discussion that took place 4 years ago. Then there's the hard problems. This is I don't know how popular it is, but a Google interview question. Implement RAND 7 in terms of RAND 5. And I won't go into the details here, but there's a lot of wrong answers to this question, which is awesome because I can use this as an interview question for college students. And even if they've researched this question, they will come in with the wrong answer because you just have to have a certain level of smarts to be able to distinguish between all those people asking the question and providing wrong answers and people providing right answers. Incidentally, Stack Overflow has the right answer. Multiple answers is much more common where you get to a discussion forum and somebody says, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Go here. I think there's an article about that. Here's a Microsoft Knowledge Base article, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have no choice but to try every answer and see if it works, usually in the dark until you accidentally kick upon something that worked. So there's no PageRank among answers to highly technical questions. A lot of times you get obsolete results because there's no PageRank. When you have a very, very narrow technical question about some very, very obscure API that's not working in some very obscure way on some obscure platform that you're programming for, there's only 100 people that are going to ever look at that question, and therefore nobody's ever going to link to the question, and certainly you can't use PageRank to link to the appropriate answer. Nobody's going to write a blog post about how the best answer to this obscure question is such and such. So the authority of all these sites or the PageRank is nil. Unless, maybe the site has some rank, but it's just a discussion forum. So it's very, very hard for a search engine to see what the right answers are. It doesn't have any way of using its normal methods. And in particular, you get certain common problems. Obsolete results is a really, really popular one, is that Google, for example, knowing nothing else about 2 pages, will take the older one and give it a little bit, or the one that's been on the internet for longer, and give it a little bit of a push. And that actually turns out to be fundamentally wrong with a lot of technologies. So a very, very common problem you find is, how do I do such and such on my iPhone? And then you get to a lot of pages saying, no, it's just not possible. There is absolutely no way to write an application for the iPhone unless you make a web page and access it via Safari. And that was true for a year, and it's not true anymore, but there's a lot of pages that still say that. Similarly, if you search right now for interior photography on Google, your #1 result is an awesome article about interior photography written by Phil Greenspun before anybody had digital cameras. So here's my 4 key reasons why search engines are struggling with these highly technical, I got a programming question problems. #1, they're too rare. They have too few views, so there's no authority. That's really #2. There are too many ways to phrase the same problem. A lot of times you're struggling to find the right words that will happen to coincide with the words that the person describing your problem happened to use, and that means that your search space basically is kind of diffused among all the different possible synonyms for a particular problem. And then there's the preference for old links. So here's 9 things that we did in Stack Overflow to try to build a site that got around all these problems. And these are the 9 building blocks of the social engineering that we did to try to create a site that was anthropologically correct and that would cause people to behave in the way that would work and that would basically solve all these problems. I'll go through them one at a time because that's the key part. Voting. This is the easiest thing. I mean, these things are really, really easy. Every single one of these ideas is copied from somewhere else. This one is copied from Reddit via Dig. Voting is the idea that you vote up the answers that are good, and it's actually astonishing on Stack Overflow how quickly the voting gets you the right answer, because other people come in and vote up the right answers. And this is a question that was asked an hour ago, and within an hour, the #1 question already had 9 votes. So as you can see, usually within a matter of minutes for common questions, you get a bunch of answers sort of flowing in, and the best ones get voted up. There is one little tweak of the voting algorithm, which is that the person who originally asked the question has the special power to bestow upon one answer as the official answer, and it comes to the top no matter what the votes are. And right below that, you'll see the #1 community voted. So here's an example of a question where the person who asked the question decided that answer over there, marked number 26, was actually better than what the community thought, or solved his problem better than what the community thought was the best answer, which was number 78. Rather than picking a particular topic of programming and attacking that first, or creating a hierarchy like Usenet, which is Web 1.0 technology, I guess, I don't know. which is old-fashioned technology, we decided to use tags. And if you look at the questions on Stack Overflow, people are pretty good at putting tags on their questions. And there are usually 2 or 3 obvious tags to put any question. So it allows you to say, I'm asking this question from a VB.NET perspective, not a C# perspective. Or I'm asking this question, I'm using, like a lot of times you'll see these questions and you'll be searching for a question and you'll get to a result that doesn't even apply to the correct technology that you're actually using. It's that same problem in a different domain. So we put the tags in, but we did really, really neat stuff with the tags. So number one, we wanted you to be able to create a view. If you're a Python programmer, we wanted you to be able to make Stack Overflow into a site that's a great Python resource. So you can tell it what questions you're interested in, what tags you're interested in, what technologies you're interested in. We also wanted you not to have to see things that you're sick and tired of hearing about, like let's say you just really don't ever want to hear about .NET programming ever again. And so you can list ignored tags, which you'll never see. But then actually Stack Overflow is doing all kinds of really smart stuff with these tags. So for example, my programming knowledge is exceedingly obsolete. I worked on a little product called Excel where I was in charge of the macro language strategy, and we created a thing called Visual Basic for Applications, which is a way of programming Excel, which is very, very old, but people still use it. And so those are the tags that I picked. You can see up there I picked VBA and Excel. And when I come to the site now, it's going to look for questions that it thinks I can answer, not because I said I was interested in those tags, but because I have successfully answered those tags in the past. Because Stack Overflow recognizes me as somebody who can answer these obsolete questions on Excel VBA. Whenever there is a question on Excel VBA, Stack Overflow is going to try to show it to me, because that's the best way it can get it answered. And as a result of this intelligence that's sort of tag-based and our knowledge of the participants in the site and what their skills are, we're able to achieve more than 90% of questions getting answered with an accepted answer. We have editing, and here's a little diff showing a typical edit that occurred. The purpose of editing was originally so that questions could get better and answers could get better and better and better rather than freezing. Most forum software, the discussion thread takes place in 2004, and 4 or 5 people participate, and then it just remains as this frozen artifact on the internet until the end of time, and that's why questions get out of date. And that also is why you can't remove errors when you discover them, and the questions never get better. So we kind of looked at Wikipedia and said, what if we let everybody come in and edit these entries and make them better and better and better? And the model for Stack Overflow, one of the early pitches was, it is a Wikipedia where every topic is an extremely specific, very, very long tail programming question. Where we'll have the question, we'll have the answers will be sorted, and anybody can come in and edit. So if you've discovered that the number one answer has a flaw in it, you can hit the edit button and fix it. And if you discover that the question was poorly written, or the question was written too narrowly, or the question was not explicit enough, you can go in and edit the question to make it a better question. And our hope is that a large body of the questions that are in Stack Overflow will become the canonical place on the internet to learn about very, very narrow, specific questions about very, very narrow and specific programming topics. So in this particular case, this guy, Martin, very quickly answered a question in hopes that he would help the person as quickly as possible. The person asking the question, just get something out there, so maybe that'll help the guy solve his problem right away. And then he came back 2 days later because he was disappointed that he wasn't earning enough points for his question, because his question was his answer was just a couple of lines saying, go use std bitset. Don't roll your own, which he spelled wrong. So somebody fixed roll later. It's not shown here. And because he wasn't earning enough points, and he obviously wanted to earn some more points, and they're just points, he went in and edited his question and provided sample code. And it got better, and he earned more points because he provided sample code. But a lot of times people will edit each other's questions, and these things get edited a lot, and sometimes there are edit wars, which is a problem. But in general, the questions, the answers get better and better and better. In order to get people to do the things that we want them to do on the site, we have a concept of badges, and this is sort of like achievements on Xbox 360. That's sort of our model for that, and it's based on the Napoleonic quote, the quote from Napoleon saying that, I don't remember it exactly, a soldier will fight long and hard for a little piece of colored ribbon. So we give people these little pieces of colored ribbon, these badges. If you look at my name up on the top of the screen, you can see next to that the 4,800. That's how many points I have. And then there's a little 15, and that means I have 15 silver badges, and the little 28 says I have 28 bronze badges. So you earn a whole bunch of badges, and anybody who sees my name anywhere it appears on the site will know that I have a certain amount of credibility, and they can see what things I've done, and people will actually go and try to earn badges to complete the set. You too can get every single badge on this list except for beta tester. because the beta is over. Karma is based on the philosophy that you can't just pay people to answer questions. And I believe that that is one of the reasons why Google Answers never really worked, because there is sort of something fundamental. Mahalo Answers, I think, is going to fail for the same reason. There's something fundamental going on here that people are willing to do for free what they're not willing to do for small amounts of money. They may be willing to do them for large amounts of money. If you asked me how much it would cost to provide a day of my consulting, there is no price. But I've spent at least a day answering people's questions on Stack Overflow. So we sort of fundamentally understood that people are not going to want to. There is no. If you try to clear a market using what I call the Econ 101 management method of very, very small payments, like I'll give you $1 if you can help me with my problem. Okay, nobody's answering it. Let's try $2. That the market is not clearing at those low levels, but people will do things for free in order to contribute to the world. So we have karma, and karma is just points. You earn points for all kinds of things, but mainly for getting your questions and answers voted up. And so the best thing you can do on the site to earn karma is to come in and vote some things up. There's a few. As you earn more and more karma, you get more and more privileges on the system. They're usually pretty nominal privileges, but they do encourage you to, it's sort of like a human CAPTCHA. Until you've asked a question and answered a question, you probably don't have enough points to comment on questions or to edit questions. And so if you come in and you're like, hey, I want to comment on this, you'll hit comment and you'll discover that you can't because you need a little bit of karma, not very much. And that'll encourage you to go do something to earn a little bit of karma. And there are all kinds of easy ways to do it. And in fact, the Wikipedia model, one thing I've actually encouraged people to do, very explicitly, is if you want to earn some quick karma and you don't know anything about programming, go find a question that seems to be kind of popular, a lot of people looking at it. Look at the top 5 answers and merge them into one big glorious answer that just cribs from those top 5 answers. You're allowed to cut and paste. And put them all together, edit it really well, write some sample code, test the sample code, and submit that as your answer, and you will get voted up, and you'll earn a lot of points for that. And that's exactly the behavior that we want to see. We want to see people improving the site, making the questions better and better, and not obsessing over the ownership of a particular question or answer. We put in pre-search. I don't know if there's a technical term for this, but when you start typing the name of your question, which I've done here, when you hit tab, we'll look for the words that are most likely to be keywords, and then we'll do a quick search of already asked questions, and we'll provide them for you there. And you can click on them and just see the answer. And that's meant as a deduping mechanism that's meant to prevent duplicates. This is not a forum for answering the same things again and again and again and having people say this has already been asked here. We're trying to create canonical questions and answers. And so we want there to be one. And it works really, really well, which is sort of surprising because we don't have very good search technology. We just have SQL Server, but it still works. And one of the things, the way I knew that Stack Overflow was going to work is on the second day of the beta, I logged on with an actual programming question. I typed the programming question in the title. I hit tab, and I saw the question had already been asked. And I clicked on it, and it had been asked, 8 minutes ago. And there were already a whole bunch of answers, and the answers had already been voted on. And the top most highly voted question answer was actually the solution to my problem. And that's a phenomenon that happens again and again and again with Stack Overflow. We designed this not with the idea of SEO, which I think is a little bit too naive. We designed our site with the assumption that our homepage is Google. The front page of Stack Overflow is you go to Google and type a question, and that's how most people find Stack Overflow, because they typed a question. And so we've optimized, I don't even want to say optimized, we've built everything around this assumption. Our URLs have the name of the question in the URL and are permanent and clean. We have whatever meta tags we have to have. We got the site maps. We've got everything. We've done everything to make our pages look as reasonable as possible to a search engine, because we knew that that's where our traffic is going to come from. Indeed, as you can see here, 86.6% of our traffic is coming in specifically from Google questions. There's a little bit of direct traffic, and that's the smaller group of users of the site who hang out on the site all the time. And for some mysterious reason, the other search engines are there. Well, they're there. You can look. Number 9 is live.com, and I have no idea why it's only 0.2% of our visitors. It doesn't really make sense. Oh well. So that was our design. That's the front end. We were really obsessed about performance. We knew that getting fast answers and the site being snippy and snappy and quick and stuff like that was important. And so here's the technology stack that we use. It's actually built on a Microsoft stack. The performance, I know you guys don't use it that much here, but the performance of C#, which is a compiled language, is just ridiculously good. This entire site is serving 16 million pages a month, and we're doing it off of 2 servers, which are almost completely unloaded. So we've got a ton of headroom on those 2 servers. One server is a web server. The other server is running Microsoft SQL Server 2008, and they're both 8-core Xeons. But and there were a lot of optimizations that went in there. But no matter what people say, this is a pretty good stack. And one of the things that I've always been concerned about is if you start building a technology like this using the Microsoft stack, you are going to pay for a Windows Server license. Lots of SQL Server licenses, which are $5,000 for every box that you put out. And the idea that you could possibly use a larger number of cheaper computers and use open source products which are free certainly occurred to us. On the other hand, when I compare our performance to similar sites that are running on the open source stack, we're using about 1/10 of the hardware that they are, unfortunately. And maybe that's because they're not good programmers. But in terms of just the types of queries that we're doing and stuff, the Microsoft stack is actually appears to be paying for itself in terms of reduced hardware. We thought that a really important part of making Stack Overflow happen was people getting questions answered on day one. And it was really important to me that we get a critical mass in there on day one so that when people tried it out, there was actually somebody there and the questions actually got answered. So I think a lot of these other sites like Amazon, Askville, Google Answers, Yahoo Answers, etc., whatever marketing power they had behind them, because those were sites about all possible questions and they didn't really have a way to get all possible people involved in the site on day one, they suffered from what I call the empty restaurant syndrome. You're walking, up and down University Ave in downtown Palo Alto trying to pick a restaurant to go into, and one of them is empty, and you will not go in there under any circumstances. So a restaurateur knows that on day one, they got to have their friends at least fill up the window tables so that it looks like there's somebody in there. And that was pretty important to us. And so that was one of the reasons why I asked Jeff Atwood to be a partner in this site, because between Joel and Software and Coding Horror, those are the number 1 and number 2 most highly trafficked technology blogs that are written by an individual who lives in either New York or California. Anyway, just kidding. We actually have a lot of traffic. I had about 1 million visitors a month, and he had probably about 1/3 of that. But that was a lot of programmers. And so we started doing this podcast, which you can listen to. It's a weekly podcast where we're actually basically designing the site, and he's giving me status reports every week. And that's podcast on IT Conversations. And it was just another way of making sure that when we launched, there would be maybe 20, 30,000 people that listen to this podcast. So here's the status report. Here's what happened with Stack Overflow. Here's how it worked out. As of about a week ago, we've had 136,579 questions have been asked. 91% have been answered. My definition of answer is not that somebody typed in an answer, but that somebody typed in an answer and somebody else upvoted the answer. So you got to have an upvote for it to count as answered. This to me is really good. If you look at the questions that are unanswered, they're either on obscure topics or sometimes they're just like way too hard. Number of posts has been growing linearly, more or less. We're at about 800,000 now. A post is either a question or an answer. Similarly, the number of registered users. This is that smaller community of people that just come to the site all the time. They've created accounts for themselves. We actually use, this is awesome. We used OpenID just because we wanted to push it really, really strongly, and it was actually successful. We don't have any login mechanism other than OpenID. But as you can see, you can get logged on just with 2 clicks if you have, say, a Google account, which is nice. So the number of registered users who've created accounts on the system is around 60,000 right now, and those are sort of the core group of people. And then we've got sort of the larger group of people who just visit the site. The uniques now is over 3 million a month, over 3 million unique visitors a month. And most of you probably know unique just means we set a cookie, and if it's still there, whatever. This is all from Google Analytics, so whatever Google Analytics means by unique visitors. The best information we've sort of triangulated from a number of sources. The people that work in developer relations at Microsoft have a number that they use, which is 9 million professional programmers in the world. There are 9 million professional programmers in the world. So I don't know how accurate 3 million is, but it looks like we're getting about 30% of them are using Stack Overflow in some way, shape, or form. And I generally, actually, this is a large crowd. How many of you have ever used Stack Overflow or seen Stack Overflow in search results? This is kind of a good group. I'm guessing that's about 40%. So I asked the same question at the Mix conference in Las Vegas, and it was about 30% in that room. So I have a feeling that in about the first 6 months, we've gotten to about 30% of the professional English-speaking programmers. We don't have any other language sites. The number of visits is over 6 million a month. Page views is running about 16 million, and of course growing pretty steadily there. Here's where the traffic comes from. The larger part, the 86%, is directly from Google, and then there's obviously refers as a certain number of people, but direct traffic are the people that I think of as the participants in the site. These are the people that like to hang out and answer questions in order to earn karma. So the last slide, where are we going in the future? Stack Overflow was designed to be specifically about programming questions, and if you try to ask a question that doesn't involve code, like why does my computer blue screen every night at midnight, you'll get kicked out, the question will get closed. And so we're building a new site called Server Fault, which is the sysadmin version of this site. It's for system administrator questions. Our goal is specifically for professional system administrators, people who's we don't want the user at home who's trying to figure out how to plug their iPod directly into the printer. We're trying to get the actual people working at their job, because what we found almost from the Yahoo Answers experience is that this kind of site only works when it's people that are doing something professionally. In other words, they really care about getting the right answers. They care about expanding their personal professional knowledge, and they're taking this seriously at a level that the teenagers asking sex questions on Yahoo don't necessarily care about that much. There are a few other things in the future. None of them are really clearly determined. That's really just sort of a couple of weeks in the future that thing's going to launch. In the long term, another part of there's sort of a different directions that Stack Overflow could go in. One direction is more towards a software product. Another direction is creating lots and lots of vertical Stack Overflows in all kinds of highly technical industries. For example, the Stack Overflow for tax accountants in the United States, for example, who have questions about the tax law. And then another possible direction is as a recruiting marketplace, which I won't go into too much detail, but we're actually accumulating quite a lot of knowledge about who's good at what technologies in the programming realm, knowledge that could be very useful to programmers that want to get hired, or programmers that want to hire other programmers. So that's really all I have. I'll turn it over to questions if there's anybody wants to. How do I start in the front row? Where the set of tags, it's just like any other tags. It's anything you type in works, but there's an autocomplete, so it tends to, as you start typing, you'll find the existing tab, and I think there is a mechanism for merging existing tabs. I think we have some kind of official question system.
Oh, we do, but you can take questions through.
Got it. Yes.
Are you seeing any bad user behavior yet, or has the community been pretty well self-policing so far?
The question was, are we seeing any bad user behavior, or is the community pretty self-policing so far? We are definitely seeing some bad user behavior, and we're constantly adjusting algorithms to try to fix it. And I would say, we try to have a Google-like approach of looking for algorithms that solve problems rather than individually just plucking out individual users or problems. So we've got all kinds of methods. There's a place where you can if you behave badly and we warn you and you don't recover from that, then we put you in a penalty box for a week while you don't get your points until the end of the week. And there's all kinds of stuff going on there. Mostly it's obviously self-policed, because with this number of questions, it has to be reasonably automatic. But we've pretty much found we've pretty much cured at this point. We're pretty much on top of the typical problems like spam. Yes.
So on Dory, we have a question.
Okay. Sorry.
We'll go Dory room.
Okay. Dory it is.
What aspect of Stack Overflow's user interface design are you most proud of?
What aspects of Stack Overflow's user interface
What makes you so great?
am I most proud of? Let's pick one thing. Well, really, it's just every time I hear somebody saying Stack Overflow is awesome, I asked a question and got an answer. And when I ask questions, it just blows me away that you see start seeing answers like in 3-4 minutes coming in. So the fact that, the truth is, as a programmer, I used to not have the patience to post a question to a discussion forum, because I knew that it would take a half a day to a day to get an answer, and I would really just sit there and Google for a long, long time trying to find the appropriate answer rather than asking it. But what's awesome about Stack Overflow is the act of asking a question is also the act of searching for an answer. And so if an answer is there, you'll find it. And if it isn't, it's just one extra click to actually commit to asking that question. And then you will actually get an answer within a usable amount of time. I mean, you don't even have to go to lunch. The answers will start coming in pretty quickly. Yes?
Have you considered licensing this technology for use inside large corporations as a cooperation technology inside?
The question was, have we considered licensing this to large corporations for licensing as an internal technology? We don't really have the resources to do that right now. We're sort of talking to various people that might be interested in providing various resources at various times, which I won't go into in too much detail. But that's something that we don't have the immediate time to do just because we're about 4 people working on this. But in the long run, it completely makes sense.
The next question from Devin Mullins. What aspect of Stack Overflow's initial design are you least proud of? What makes you so
Hey, that
awful?
sounded like the first one. What am I least proud of in the design? Boy. I'm stumped. It's just, let's see. There are, personally, it sort of bothers me that right now we are closing questions that are off topic without having a place to send people. So if somebody asks a question that really isn't a programming question, but Stack Overflow is the perfect technology to get an answer to this question, but it's not a programming question, the community will jump on them and close it aggressively and in a way that is not necessarily newbie friendly and say, go somewhere else. I don't know where, but go somewhere else. And we just don't have a place to send them right now. So we're hoping that Server Fault will get all those system administrator questions. We'll give them a home. But that's sort of an aspect of the community that's a little bit too focused, in my opinion, on the purity of the homepage only being programming questions. Question from the room. Yes. What is our current or future plan for monetization? We don't really talk about that too much. I should say that we have a very little bit of advertising on the site. Pretty much only people that have aggressively banged down our door and literally deposited money in our bank account without permission. And so they got little advertisements. And that is enough to keep the site running. Like I said, it's 4 people and 2 servers. It doesn't take a lot to run this. And our primary goal is getting answers to programmer questions. On the other hand, with a community of basically a third of the world's great programmers, we think there will be other monetization opportunities. We are never, ever, ever going to charge to go to the site. We're never going to have interstitials. We're never going to have advertising that has any kind of motion in it, like flashing, ever. Not just Flash, but like animated GIFs, none of that either. And the basic core aspects of the site will always remain free for everybody permanently. We got another Dory one.
Yeah. From Guido Van Rossum. I'm still regularly referring people to your blog post. Quote, things you should never do part 1. Oh. Was there ever a part 2?
Things you should never do part 1 is a riff on the history of the world part 1, a Mel Brooks movie. There is no number 2, and that's the joke. And you may have to wait until the end of time to determine that there is no things you should never do part 2. But I think you know what, the 2 probably. The number 1 thing you should never do, part 1, the things you should never do, for those in the audience that don't know, this is an article I wrote a long time ago saying, if you have working code that is large, a lot of people are depending on it, does a lot of things, you don't just start from scratch. You got to try to somehow find a way of moving the existing body of code that you have into new code, and maybe you rewrite every line, but you don't start from scratch because you lose too much knowledge that you spent, and you had to fight pretty hard for that working code that you have. And the time I wrote that, probably the number 1 victim of that was the major Netscape to Mozilla rewrite, which in my mind lost them about 3 years in a time in which Internet Explorer gained almost 90% market share. And it is true that Firefox eventually came out and kind of recovered and sort of caught up. But the only reason Firefox caught up is because the Internet Explorer team had been disbanded for 5 years and wasn't working. So they kind of lucked out. But you don't stop. You don't rewrite things from scratch. And I think at the time I got an email from somebody saying, "Have you looked into Perl 6?" And so this was 8 years ago that I wrote this, and it was a complete rewrite of Perl that I believe is not yet shipping. I'm not really a Perl follower, but Perl has been pretty much forgotten. So yeah, there's nothing that you can do that's that bad to a software product than to just decide to start over. Yes.
What kinds of UI changes would you have made if you were focusing more on unsophisticated consumer amateur kind of audiences rather than hardcore professional programmers?
So the question is, what kind of UI changes would we have made if we were focused on unsophisticated consumers rather than hardcore professionals? The first thing is, I don't think this site is going to work for gardening questions ever. It might work for gardener questions, like professionals, but for gardening questions, this is probably not the right kind of site. It has to be professionals that are sitting at their desk doing something professional, and a professional sitting at their desk doing something professional will probably learn a slightly complicated UI if it lets them get their stuff done. So they'll probably overcome this. That said, there's a bunch of programming-specific stuff that's in Stack Overflow. For example, the programmers seem to be really, really good at tagging their questions. And when they're not so good at tagging their questions, anybody can edit it and add tags. But surprisingly, we didn't even have to explain what tags were. We didn't have to tell anybody guidance on what tags should be. They get in there and they tag them, and they tag them correctly, and they just sort of understand that. And I don't think that would apply in other fields. You'd have to come up with some other method other than tagging probably, or something a little simpler. Although I'm not sure, maybe the Flickr experience would be different. The other thing is that because we're focused on programmers, we knew that a lot of these questions would have sample code in them. So we have this big old control that uses sort of a markdown syntax and shows you a preview of what you're going to get from your markdown. And so you're actually writing in a slightly awkward language called Markdown, which is sort of beyond simplified HTML, but it's not a WYSIWYG editor by any stretch of the imagination. And we have not had a single programmer complain about that or have any kind of problems about that in any way, shape, or form. So, but I don't think that Markdown is necessarily the right approach for gardeners.
Jeff's post on February 27th suggests that the number of questions and answers posted per month isn't increasing as you'd expect. Does this worry you, or is a steady increase in the data bank of programming questions answers good enough? That's from John Screet.
I'm not really sure about this because I haven't dug enough into the numbers and I don't know enough statistics. All those growth charts that I was showing you a minute ago are all showing something that is, I don't know, is that linear? Is that exponential? Is that the beginning of an exponential curve? I'm not really sure. It doesn't worry me at all as long as I see, I mean, like literally every week I go and I look at Google Analytics and, we're kind of doubling every 4 months. And it's been that way since, the 4th month. So let me take a question from sort of far in the back because I've been just doing the front rows here rudely. Is anybody in the back? No, too quiet. There's one over here. Yes.
So speaking of growing questions, do you think that would die off as burning questions that people never get the answer to get answered?
Yeah.
Do you track sort of the interest in questions by how old they are? Sort of a histogram of, wow, there's a bunch of questions from 6 months ago that are still really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Right. So obviously there are old questions that are boring and nobody ever goes to. There are old questions that have become the canonical place on the internet to ask a particular very interesting question about a very common programming problem that people hit. And a lot of the questions are like, I'm seeing this particular crash. What could it be? Oh, you've got this bug in your code. Okay, and that's never going to be interesting to anybody ever again. So they're sort of different classes of questions. The only tracking that we really have for that is when you see a question, we track the number of views. And we'll show it to you right there how many views that question has ever gotten. And occasionally you'll see questions that have tens of thousands of views, and those are usually popular questions like, what is your favorite programmer's cartoon? Let's see if I can bring that up. What is your favorite programmer's cartoon? Let's see how good our search is. So that one's got 585 votes. It's been viewed 120,000 times. I'm surprised that this Foxtrot question comes out first. I kind of like the little Bobby Tables one personally. Yeah. I mean, there's certainly like questions like this will get slash dotted and digged and all that kind of stuff, and it's going to be high and page rank even because everybody's linking to it and so forth. So there will be questions that are like super popular, questions that just die a innocuous death. One thing that we are seeing is that we are becoming the place of choice for new programming technology questions to be asked. So, for example, when the iPhone came out, Apple made the iPhone developers sign an NDA that said that they wouldn't talk to one another and provided them with a very, very crappy forum that nobody liked for asking each other questions. And so they all came to Stack Overflow because it had basically just launched. And we're kind of the number one resource for iPhone programming. And what you'll see a lot of these days is when a new programming technology comes out, rather than trying to build their own forum or their own place to get questions asked or their own community support users, they'll just guide their users by saying, hey, use the tag, whatever it may be, soup, whatever the technology is called. And so newer technologies tend to just sort of organize around Stack Overflow, around a tag, rather than trying to make their own forums. And we expect to see a lot more of that, whereas older technologies like Visual Basic 6, which is now completely and utterly obsolete and not even supported anymore, still have a gigantic body of knowledge in the website with a hyphen, and not very much knowledge in Stack Overflow, and that'll probably be that way forever. And I don't even know if we have any COBOL questions. Just so there may be intensely obsolete technologies. Yeah, I got 44 COBOL questions.
Once you have a large expert user base, it gets very hard to add new features or change the UI of your product. Are you guys facing this problem? And if so, how do you experiment with new features?
Once you have a large user base, okay, that was on the microphone, so I don't have to repeat that. I kind of feel like at this point we're sort of tweaking, and we have a couple of places where the conversation about new features takes place. Basically about 3 places. We don't want Stack Overflow to have questions about Stack Overflow because that's not the topic. That's off topic by definition. It's not a programming question. So there's a user voice site where feature requests come in, and there's some conversation about those feature requests on user voice. There's the podcast that Jeff and I do, and people will call in with questions, and people will email us, and we'll talk about new features as they develop. And then there's the Stack Overflow blog, where new features are introduced, and the comments of the Stack Overflow blog are really where most of the discussion about new features takes place. But at this point, we haven't done anything that I think would really shock people into like not being able to use the site. We haven't made it a Twitter clone on the homepage. So anything else from the room? Yeah.
So how do you handle when somebody edits a response that's really highly marked?
Yeah.
How do you know it's still good?
When somebody edits a response that was highly marked, how do you know it's still good? Well, you can't, but it's like Wikipedia, so you can search the history and sort of see. There is sort of this weird concept, because we're a combination between, in some ways, like a blog or a personal site where there's authorship and sites are written by questions are written by a particular person. So all these questions here sort of have ownership to the questions, and the answers will have ownership. But we have this concept over here called a community wiki. And a community wiki is a question or an answer that has either been put in community ownership, where nobody accrues the points and nobody owns the answer, or has been forced into community wiki mode for various reasons. If a question is one thing that we don't want to happen is somebody asks, what's your favorite programmer's cartoon? And then gets 585. Oh, this wasn't the number one answer. This was the question itself. This is the number one answer, 812. And that was that's the number one user answer. Things will eventually get into community wiki mode because we don't want somebody earning 1 billion points of karma just because they asked a really popular and slightly off-topic question that got onto Dig. So if a question gets edited too much or an answer gets edited too much, and there are metrics for all these things that are very complicated and they're all documented somewhere, we'll take away the personal ownership of that one. Anything else?
Yeah, I have one more here. Why are you saying, and this is an anonymous question, why are you saying that, quote, kids at Google and Microsoft are working on hopeless and useless architecture astronomy, unquote, so as if it were something bad?
I don't remember saying that. I'm going to have to search for that.
Yeah. You can use any search engine you like.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find a search engine here. I don't know if there is one in it. Does anybody have a search engine in their room? Why are kids Microsoft, Google, architecture, astronauts, what that? I'm going to have to put down the microphone. Architecture, astronauts, which I can't spell.
I'm sure it'll suggest it.
There you go. That's not it, though. I wouldn't say that. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to answer that one right now. Is that it? But this isn't me. This is my discussion groups, I'm afraid. Why Google and Microsoft are... Let's see what this guy says. He's got a link. Oh, maybe this was it. Hailstorm, Groove. Okay, I picked on Groove. Live Mesh, got rid of them. Oh, yeah. Google paying untenable salaries to kids with more ultimate frisbee experience than Python. That's actually true. Your starting salaries are too high, guys. Especially out of college. Yeah, I don't know. This was mainly because, and this is over, thank God. But Microsoft and Google are really like gigantic vacuum cleaners at Stanford and Berkeley and UW, and it really is. And I'm going to stand by this. It really is the case that no matter how useful the stuff is that you're working on and that Microsoft is on, to a large extent, it's much harder for small companies to get good people because of the presence of Microsoft and Google, which for a long time were in a mode of hire as many people as we can possibly get under all circumstances. And honestly, I'll bet you have colleagues that are working on things that you think are probably not as important as some other startups you may know of. So that's the best I can do to defend that one.
You probably have time for one more question if
sure.
there's one in the audience. We're
one
done.
Another audience question? Does anybody want to know what the starting salary is at Google for a new contract this year? Yes.
Would you be investing in a way to allow people asking questions or answering questions to embed executable code samples safely in the answer?
Would we want to embed executable code samples safely in the answers? Right now, I mean, I think I don't exactly know what you're proposing, but I think we're about the code and the source code, and so we do have a way to embed the source code. We'd definitely be interested in ways to make the embedding of source code better. We're using a little tool from Google, actually. And having the actual source code around the page, that sounds like a pretty bad idea, even if it was safe. I don't know. No, not necessarily. I mean, when you think about the type of questions that people are asking here, seeing it then run in the browser, I mean, that would probably be applicable only to, CSS questions or JavaScript questions, but not to the majority of the type of code that people are really asking about here. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. Appreciate the attention.